In this episode, I speak with the incredible Natalie Ryan Hebert. She is a certified RTT hypnotherapist specializing in the world of PMDD, that is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It is a severe form of PMS. Many women are familiar with mood changes, anxiety changes in the lead up to their period. However, PMDD takes this to a whole other level. In this episode, we'll be discussing what are normal PMS symptoms and what is PMDD. What does the journey looking for a diagnosis for PMDD look like? And Natalie bravely shares her story, which I'm sure you'll find very inspiring. Is it even possible to heal from this complex condition? There is a lot of different ideas and information around PMDD out there, and there can be a lot of disheartening information as well. So in this episode, of course, we're offering a very different and exciting perspective on it. And finally, we're exploring the power of RTT, rapid transformational therapy, hypnotherapy for women with PMDD. I think every woman needs to know this information, whether you suffer PMDD yourself, you will know someone who does. And healing from debilitating cycle-related anxiety and depression is so possible. Let's dive in. You're going to love this episode just as I did. Okay, let's chat to Natalie. Let's go to the show. Natalie, I'm very excited to welcome you to the show. Hello.
Hello, Georgie. Lovely to be with you.
Coming to us from Copenhagen.
Yes. Aussie like you, but living in Copenhagen now.
Yes, and you've just had a trip home to Australia. Well, not home.
Yeah, I did.
Do you still see Australia as home?
Oh, it's a funny thing. I feel like my heart's kind of divided. I also lived in the UK for nearly 9 years. So there's pieces of me all over the place. I feel like I tread into the UK and I go, oh yeah, like there's chapters of my life that belong in different countries. So it's a strange thing to explain. There's probably others who've lived overseas who know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I part of me feels like Australia's home, but part of me also feels Denmark's home.
Must be a beautiful way to live your life, you've got multiple homes.
Yeah, multiple homes in my heart. Only one here in Copenhagen, though, bricks and mortar.
yeah. But I mean, home, I feel, is an emotional thing regardless, right? It's not actually the sort of, the physical stuff that we think of it as.
Oh, that is so spot on, and something I've really just, in coming home, to Denmark again. Whoa, and I actually had a session about it because, an RTT session for myself, because I had this sort of grief or something that I needed to process. And it's true, it was actually the 4-year-old me moving from Sydney to the Gold Coast that hadn't processed that big move, that needed to be sort of reparented as we do with rapid transformational therapy, to bring that home feeling. It's inside of me. It's my family and all those I love. They're within me, and you carry that with you wherever you go. So yeah,
I love that you took that and added that on, because that is so true. And I definitely work with clients who are like, I'm trying to find home, I'm trying to find where I belong, and it's like,
oh yeah,
you can make where you belong wherever you are. You can make it home. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to speak with you about RTT hypnotherapy, because I was just saying to Natalie before we hit record, to those listening, that I haven't had a fellow RTT hypnotherapist on the show before. So it's going to be really exciting to weave that in as we chat. But Natalie, before we go into your story and how you found RTT and your experience with PMDD, I'd love to know, what is it that you just wish more women knew in general?
Oh, that the first thing that's coming to mind is that when you really boil everything down, it all comes down to either self-abandonment or self-rejection in some way. we can think it's what's happened to me, and oh, my mum did this when I was a kid, or my dad left, and all these things can happen that can create the trauma. But the real trauma is the disconnection from self, and that's what we need to heal. And that will come out in all manner of ways, be it anxiety, depression, premenstrually, which is what I specialize in. All of this becomes exacerbated when the hormones shift. The estrogen, which I call the accommodating hormone, because it's like a nice thick blanket that accommodates everything until it drops, and then you're just left kind of like with a thinned veil and everything's laid bare. So you're back to what I was saying, that, so say, for example, it's best if I use an example, say your dad left when you were 2 years old, and your whole life, you know, dad left and he wasn't there for me. But the real wound is when you made it mean, that must mean I don't matter. That must mean I'm not lovable. It must mean I'm not good enough. And it's actually you abandoning you, because you've now judged yourself as unworthy. And that's the real issue that we can heal, because it's within us. You don't need your dad to come back and say sorry. You just need to recognize, oh, it was me that really created the biggest wound in myself, and see how that happened, and then undo it. So that's something I try to weave through everything I teach, is it's all within your power to heal yourself. You don't have to wait for other people to see the light for you to be able to be free of the past.
Oh, that's beautiful, because we give so much of our power away to others. And it's so easy to do, to just blame whatever's happened and where we are at in our lives on other people. And that's not to be insensitive about it, but
No.
I think it's so exciting that we have the possibility to call our power back, no matter what other people do. It doesn't matter. We don't, like you said, you don't have to wait for your father to come and say these things to you and tell you you're enough. You can just take that power back for you.
And even if you did, if you didn't believe it, it would all just be like water off a duck's back anyway.
Yeah.
It has to be within.
Beautiful. So Natalie, you have been through your own journey experiencing PMDD. What was that like for you?
Well, if ever you talk to anybody who experiences PMDD, they'll tell you it's like Jekyll and Hyde. It's like I said before, when the estrogen drops, it's everything unhealed in you sort of comes to the surface. That's my take on it. You know, that's not what doctors will tell you. They'll be like, oh, we don't really know, here's some antidepressants, or let's try birth control and just keep just see if we can tweak your hormones and see if that helps. But this has been an issue for thousands of years. There's been different names for it over time. But it's been a mystery that we've been trying to solve for millennia for women. Back in Freud's time, it was called hysteria. Hyster meaning uterus, because what they believed is all to do with the uterus. And yeah, it's true. It's definitely a uterus female thing that's happening here, because I'll go into this later, but for me, to describe what it was like, it was just like Jekyll and Hyde. It was like I'd be happy, positive, wonderful, loving for 2 weeks, and then ovulation would happen, and it'd be just this slow decline into hell. And it's called, a lot of people with PMDD will call it Hell Week, which I try and say, don't call it that, because the mind's very suggestible. And if you keep telling yourself, here comes Hell Week, then that's what you're going to get. You sort of need to say, here comes self-care week. Here's where I need to be kinder to myself. This is the autumn of my cycle. And to think of your cycle in 4 seasons, because there are within the cycle kind of 4 seasons. The spring is when your period just finishes and you're sort of like, feeling coming out of my shell again now, and you're feeling all bright and little happy, and you can feel the estrogen rising. Summer is like when you ovulate, and the fruit is hanging ripe on the vine, and you feel, most aroused. Then your partner's sexier than ever. Then the summer fades and you come into the autumn, and this is where you start going inwards. This is where you've said yes to a party invitation a couple of weeks ago. You're suddenly like, I don't know if I really want to go. And you start to just feel a little bit more like, I just want to snuggle under a blanket now. And then winter is the shedding of the lining of the uterus, where all the leaves and the trees fall. So we do, within 1 month, just like nature, have 4 seasons. But for women with PMDD, that autumn is not a nice time. It's not a snuggly, cozy time. It's a time where all of your unresolved trauma surfaces and you become highly sensitive. You will be triggered so easily by the smallest things. I call them grains of salt that hit your wounds. And you think it's the grains of salt that are the problem, and you'll attack your partner or whoever else has triggered you off without realizing I'm wounded, and that's why this grain of salt is hurting me.
Yeah, beautiful. And so was this something that slowly built up and became apparent in your life as you moved deeper into your menstruating years, or was it something that happened at the onset of menarche for you?
It's hard to say. Like, I've thought of that a lot, going, when did it actually start? And, you know, my parents divorced when I was around about the time I started my period, actually. So it was a very tumultuous time in my life. And there was a lot of pain around that for me. So there were a lot of tears and things. And I remember having to leave school one day because I just broke down in the middle of science class. You know, that could happen to any teenage girl in the middle of her parents separating.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, my brother would say, you know, that I'm a bit of a roller coaster. And so I guess that it had been there from once the periods began, but it certainly got worse over time. When I moved away, certain things triggered things off. Like I say, it's like there's this box of pain inside of you, and for the first 2 weeks it's closed, and then after ovulation, once that estrogen starts dropping and the progesterone starts rising, it's like the box of pain, everything you've never really dealt with and haven't put to bed, all the subconscious negative beliefs start to become stronger. The factors for PMDD that I've noticed is that generally you'll tend to be highly sensitive, highly empathetic, highly creative. All of those. You've got the cycle, and there's the trauma of some sort. We've all got it. We've all got some sort of trauma, but it's down to that sensitivity, creativity, empathy thing, because I think the more of that you have for others, which is a gift, the more you also feel and are very in touch with your own stuff.
Yeah.
Which is really hard to ignore. It's like you've become flooded with it. So what was your question? Tangent.
We started with, you know, when you noticed it, and that sort of blurring of, was it just that you were going through an emotional time in your teen years, or was it actually PMDD? And you were saying your brother would say you've always been at that emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, but I think once I got married and had a child, everything got even worse. So I think it was okay, you know, when I was pregnant, breastfeeding, there was, you know, the usual
no cycle when you're pregnant.
There's no cycle when you're pregnancy, so you of course have a whole lot of hormonal things, but I don't think I even realized that it was hormonal for a very long time. I just thought sometimes I get very, very emotional. Sometimes I get very, very, like, I just didn't have the awareness back then. This is back in my mid to late 20s. Sometimes it would just feel like I'd want to change everything. I want to move. I don't want to do this anymore. I didn't want to be married to him anymore. We are divorced now, my ex-husband, but I've remarried and everything's wonderful there. But that relationship was very triggering for me. And that's what I find with my clients. The partner will get the brunt of it all, because that's the primary bond now. And all that stuff that didn't get healed from childhood now gets projected onto your primary bond, which is your partner.
That's what we try to do so much. We enter relationships thinking subconsciously, we're not conscious of this, of course, but I can heal what wasn't met, in my earlier relationships with my parents, which is a fascinating one.
Yeah, it's like Pandora's box just opens up. You didn't even know it's there till you get into a relationship, and we all draw ourselves. We will be the perfect match for whoever's there to actually be a trigger to whatever's unhealed in us. And it'll usually be quite a painful relationship, but a lot of stuff will be brought to the surface. Yeah. And so my first marriage, and I'm sure it was the same for him, I think we worked out a lot of stuff with each other. It was very painful a lot of the time. But I think we're both remarried now, and we came through so much together in that first relationship. We met when I was 21. Yeah, then there was a lot that was brought to the surface, and that premenstrual shift puts a spotlight on everything. Yeah. So every month it's brought up again. And I know a lot of those listening who experience this, and even if you don't consider that you have PMDD, but just PMS, premenstrually we're far more sensitive to things.
Yeah. How is PMDD different to PMS, which is where, I would say it's a fairly common experience to feel somewhat more sensitive before you're due for your period or your bleeding time? Yeah.
I mean, PMDD, to give you one of the biggest symptoms that is different, and I do feel it's a spectrum. I do feel it's a PMS to PMDD. It's not like you either have PMDD or you don't. It can be extremely severe. And where does PMS end and PMDD begin? But what determins it is it debilitating? Suicidal thoughts are very common. Suicide is very common. Around, I think some crazy figure like 20% of those with PMDD will at some point attempt suicide.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's dangerous. Like it's a dangerous disorder. We need to be doing more about it. Because 1 in 20 women have it, and there's probably a higher statistic. Really, that's what we know based on diagnosis by doctors. But there's plenty out there with it who don't even realize what's going on. Like me in my early 20s, and late 20s, no idea that that's what the diagnosis would be called. So 1 in 20 are diagnosed with it, and 20% of those at some point are going to attempt to kill themselves. It's pretty bad, isn't it? So I guess the difference is it's debilitating. It creates huge disruption in relationships. There's a feeling of total despair, a feeling of being completely hijacked. Like I used to say, it's like my blood has turned to tears. That's really good. That was how it felt when I would tell my husband, I feel like my blood has turned to tears, like everything inside my body just feels sad and painful and full of just all the emotions were just flooding around every cell of my body. That's how it felt. Compared to normally,
would you feel that creep on at some point after ovulation? Did it sort of build in intensity, or was it not quite as clean cut as that?
Some experience it as like from one day to the next, they wake up and go, oh, okay, here we are. And others, it's not so, it's more of a gradual thing, because it is a gradual drop in the estrogen and then the rise in the progesterone. There is a bit of a symphony of hormones going on to make the whole reproductive process work. So it's different for everybody, and the symptoms can vary from person to person as well. Yeah. And as far as this is why I say we've all got our own box of pain that is released. Is that coming up for you as really high anxiety? Is it rage? Is it depression? All of those are the sorts of things that can come up in PMDD and then disappear after the period comes. Like if you can feel suicidal one day, worthless, what's the point of living? Period comes, and you look back and go, what was all that about? And you don't even recognize who you were. That's why often that people will be diagnosed with bipolar instead of PMDD, because it's like, oh, you seem to be up and down, happy one day and sad, sad and then happy. But it really is like, it is cyclical and around the period.
So important to track the cycle and see how those mental symptoms link up, I think.
Yes, so good. And, that's what didn't exist back. And it's so amazing how fast things have progressed with technology. Because, back in 2006, the iPhone had just come out. There wasn't like the period tracker app and flow app. There wasn't all of that back then. So you'd have to, write it in your diary or something, real old school, to track your symptoms. And whereas these period tracker apps make it so easy now just to, or even just on iPhone health, there's just a whole period tracking thing. So it's very much to the fore now. It's not something that used to be even talked about so much 20 years ago.
I always think, Natalie, if we don't know where we're at in our cycle, and this is PMDD regardless, just as a woman, it's so helpful. It's like driving a car blind or not having read the manual, like not knowing how, if we just know where we're at, we can be so much more understanding of ourselves where we are in our cycle.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Like you don't expect a tree to have fruit on it in an apple tree, maybe, like don't push a tree to be blossoming when it's the middle of winter. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't expect that of a tree, yet we expect ourselves to be like that. And it's really because the workplace was set up back when women weren't working, and everything advanced and wonderful, that we have equal opportunity and all of that, which we're still trying to get, because we still carry so much of that invisible load with the kids and the domestic stuff that kind of just, what's the word, being carried over, we're just out of habit, seeing our mothers do it a certain way and all of that. But the workplace is set up for the male cycle. The male cycle goes testosterone spike in the morning. That's it, 24 hours, testosterone spike in the morning. There's not a monthly cycle going on for a man.
Yeah.
And the workplace, most workplaces, they're set up for that.
Yeah.
Go get your coffee at the coffee machine, sit down at your desk and keep going. There's not like, oh, let's allow for where you are. And this is why I love working for myself, because I actually have, I honor my cycle within my month. I go, here's the premenstrual week. I'm going to block out so I don't have as many one-to-one RTT sessions, which take a lot of energy. I schedule time for massage. I schedule time to take a nap, make sure I go for a walk around the lake, all that sort of stuff. Because like if I worked at a company or for someone else, that wouldn't be possible.
And then we have women starting to believe, well, there's something wrong with us. Like, there's something wrong with me. Why aren't I as energized and productive every single day of every single month? And we develop this idea that there's something wrong, when in fact we are these perfect, beautiful, cyclical beings, just like the trees, just like the flowers. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with us.
Exactly. And, it's not to say you're just useless for autumn and winter. They have, that's a more of an internal time. Maybe you get more ideas in that time. You're more intuitive. You are more tuned into perhaps the workplace dynamics. There are certain things that are better there, and then certain things that are better in the spring and the summer, where, I'm really up for holding a meeting this week. Whereas in the winter, you're like, don't really feel like getting up in front of the whole team today. I feel like being home with a blanket around me watching Netflix, but here I am at work, so I'm just going to take it easy. But allowing for that within yourself. If your workplace can't really do that, because not every woman is ovulating and menstruating at the same time within the workplace, so they can't structure it like that. But within yourself, you can allow for it and honor it and be mindful and compassionate.
Absolutely.
For yourself, yeah.
So Natalie, during that time, before you knew all of this amazing information that's so helpful, before you had the manual to the car,
Mhm.
understanding your body and how it works and all of these amazing things, what did you think was going on before you knew what PMDD was and how to work with it, heal it, and honor it in yourself?
Oh gosh, I just go into the doctor going, you've got to help me. Something's really wrong. I think I got to a point of saying, you know, my hormone, there's something with my hormones. Like I could see, okay, this is a hormone thing. This is premenstrual that's happening. I finally worked that out, you know. But then I was put on antidepressants, tried birth control, that just made things worse. Antidepressants, I just felt numb. It has side effects that I didn't like. So there wasn't really an answer back then. But
Yeah.
what happened, it came to a point for me, you know, I remarried and it wasn't as bad, but it was still happening. And it'd be like I'd go into a black hole.
Yeah.
And my husband said, like, you simply have to master this. And it really made me angry. And like at the time, it's like, you try this. Like it's literally like drink a bottle of vodka and then just know that you're drunk and drive home safely. Like,
Yeah.
you can't just go, oh, because can't you just know that you're hormonal and, you know, calibrate for that? I mean, can't you just drink a bottle of vodka and drive home without crashing the car because you know you're drunk? You can't, like, you're flooded with these chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
But what I realized is, like what I just said, right, no, and this was the moment for me, I've spoken about this before in other interviews and things too, where I looked in the mirror, and this is where I decided that victimhood was over for me. And I said to myself, looked in my eyes and said, no one is coming to save you. I tried the doctors, I tried the antidepressants, I tried the Agnes Castus, I tried all the things, the meditation, the yoga, everything, all the supplements. Nothing was fixing it. And when I made that decision, that's when it was almost like the universe had been waiting for me to step up as the student. And then the teachers started coming in. And what started to happen is I began to realize what I now teach is that, yes, there's the hormonal factor, but the real thing that we need to look at is the trauma. And when you can heal that, there's nothing for the magnifying glass to magnify. So you can have your hormonal shift. Your box of pain can open up all at once, but if you've done the work to heal what was in that box of pain, you're not going to be triggered. When you heal those wounds, the grains of salt can't come in and trigger them off. That's the key to healing PMDD, is healing your trauma. And when I made that choice to own my shit and myself and say, whatever's happened to me, it's not my fault, but it's my responsibility now to do something about it. No one's going to save me. It's going to have to be me. And then the next thing you know is, like, this opportunity to train in metacognitive psychology came up for me. I jumped on that. And that's a huge part of what I teach now. And then I saw Marissa Peer on a YouTube ad. And usually I just go waiting for that skip ad button, click, 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 get rid of the ad. But I didn't click skip ad with Marissa. I went, what is this? And I kept listening and listening. And then I clicked onto another video. And I went down that Marissa Peer rabbit hole on YouTube and went, this is amazing. And I just knew I've got to do this.
And for those listening, Marissa Peer is the founder and creator of RTT, which we studied. Oh, she is incredible. Yeah,
she really is. And so I trained in RTT and rapid transformational therapy, not thinking, oh, here's the cure to PMDD. And I didn't even think that. I was thinking, I was just drawn to it. And really felt I want to be able to do this for other people. And because that's the high empathy part of me, that therapy is, you know, it's such a wonderful thing for someone like me. And then my period arrived and I went, where was all the chaos? And then again, and then again. I was like, oh my gosh. And it all, like, it came to me. It's like, wow. It's the three things. It's the hormonal cycle. it's the high sensitivity, creativity, empathy, and it's the trauma. And I've healed this trauma. So like through doing rapid transformational therapy and the training and the really embodying I am enough, which is the central message of rapid transformational therapy, everything started to change. And then I went, I'm really onto something here. Like, this is huge. And I started like this kind of pilot program of the Red Tent program. And I had 8 women join, and I worked with them, and they all had the same results as me. And to this day are still free of PMDD. They still would say, oh, I have a bit of PMS sometimes, you know, as I do, I'm still female. But that PMDD thing, that's gone. And that's what I do now. That's what I have made my purpose, is to take that, all that mess I went through, and to help others find the same freedom I did.
Do you know what I hear in your story, Natalie? For anyone listening, because I had the most intense goosebumps as you were telling that.
Oh.
Just that it can take the most simple of moments, a shift of, I'm doing this, I am choosing this, I'm making this work, it's happening, and I'm taking responsibility for myself. The looking at yourself in the mirror, pulling yourself together, like out of the hopelessness of it all, to create this incredible, you know, ripple effect of then this leads on to the next thing, the domino effect, this leads on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it just can magnify into a completely different life, which is what you've created for yourself and for other people.
And that I kind of, in some weird way, wasn't alone in it. Like, I opened up my awareness to it, and the universe or the world around me, it was already full of of the things. It's like that whole, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Marissa had been there for years, but I couldn't see her.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't until I was ready that she came into my awareness. And yeah, so it's that readiness, and it's that drawing a line in the sand with yourself. It's like, I just can't tolerate my own bullshit anymore. And just going, and kind of stepping up above, and out of that victim position of, oh, my life's so, and saying, enough is enough. This, I don't know how I'm going to fix it or how I'm going to change, but something has to change. And that's the moment there where you decide to own your life, that magic starts to happen.
Yeah. You just actually reminded me, I've never thought of it that way, but I thought about doing the RTT about 2 years before I actually did it. And it was while I was in a particular relationship. Anyway, it was only after that relationship ended, and even a year post that ending, that I actually studied it, which is so interesting. It just was a matter of when you're ready. Sometimes there are some things we need to learn or experience first. Sometimes we need to really know what powerlessness or rock bottom is to really experience the transformation, the hope, and what life can be, the expansion.
Yeah. And if I had not gone through that, I wouldn't have the compassion for those that I work with now.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a large part of what I offer, is that complete understanding of, look, I've been there, I know it, I know how painful it is, which you don't feel when you go to the doctor. And I felt that coldness so many times, going and being in just floods of tears and desperation and help me.
Yeah.
And the doctor, I mean, it was a male, British, tight, stiff upper lip doctor, the one I'm thinking of. But I mean, there was no compassion or empathy coming from him at all. And I just ended up feeling even more broken leaving his clinic. Whereas those who work with me feel like I already see them as whole. It's just like, you know, you've just got some trauma that needs healing. That's all. You're not broken. You're just wounded, and wounds can be healed.
Like so many of us too, almost pretty much all of us. What human being goes through life without trauma?
No human being, I don't think. You know, there's always going to be something.
You'd have to be wrapped up in bubble wrap and told every day by someone like, I love you, you're enough, to not have trauma.
Even then, like, you can't get away from it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, you know, I've had clients whose parents have been so loving and so, but they love me so much, but I don't think I'm that good, or like their interpretation.
Yeah.
You also have to allow for the child's interpretation. How did the child take that? Did it feel like too much pressure? Oh, I'm their everything. How am I ever going to deliver on how amazing they think I am? Like, you can't win. There's always going to be something that you later as an adult have to come and own, and reparent in yourself for the decisions and the misinterpretations you made when you didn't know any better as a child.
That's such a good point. And very overly loving parents can sometimes still leave their mark, because I always say we're going to mess up our children some way. Let's just like take that pressure off as well, that you need to be a perfect parent. Yeah,
exactly. So many mothers come through my program and they're like, oh no, like what this is highlighting to me is just all of the mistakes I've made with my own child. And I say, just please, just let it go, because you don't know, firstly, whether every child, interprets things differently. You don't know, you can't be sure how they're taking it in. There can be things that you think were nothing that have actually impacted them more than you know, that you could never have, what's the word,
you can't know,
or controlled. You just have to do your best. And remember that so many of the things we've been through end up giving us these silver linings, or these huge, massive life lessons. If I think of my childhood and some of the things that happened there within my family, it's probably responsible for why now I have such high empathy, because I had to, as a child, be tuned into, how's everybody today? Is there a mood that's going to explode in a second? So I could say, oh, if only I didn't have that walking on eggshells situation. No, but then my empathy wouldn't be as highly attuned as it is now. So that we also get so many gifts from these. It's not like, oh, trauma upon trauma. It's like, well, yeah, we're also learning and adapting and changing and developing, becoming through the difficult experiences.
Exactly. Life is all about mistakes and failures and pain, as well as the good things, but we have to accept that as a reality, that it's not wrong.
And you're not broken. It all comes back to, like I said at the very beginning, if you can come and own yourself and decide that you are lovable yourself in your own eyes, then that's it, really. No matter what's happened to you, if you still have your own love, then you're intact. And that's the wholeness. Is, where am I not loving myself? Where am I judging myself as wrong or bad or not enough? And working on that. And that's where the work really is.
Natalie, do you find that the women that work with you, is there a particular sort of demographic? Are you noticing a pattern in, is it usually that they have reached that sort of, they've had a baby and they're post-pregnancy, postpartum, or in that motherhood stage of life?
I think if there was like a bell curve, the top of the bell curve would be those in their late 20s, early 30s, who have perhaps got married, and then now that relationship is triggering things, and they're like, oh gosh, I'm ruining my relationship, I need to fix this. Or I've had a child and I'm ruining my parent, like this, my child is, this is not the mother I wanted to be. It's when it starts impacting on others that you love, that I think a lot will come forward and say, I have to fix this now. If it's just sort of you and your own world, you sort of deal with it. But when you see it starts to impact those you love, and you also are at risk of, losing that relationship or really damaging the relationship with your child, you feel like, okay, it's not just me anymore. I have to fix this now. So I find that that's where it becomes sort of this rock bottom moment, or this crucial turning point of something has to be done. That's where the line gets drawn in the sand, like this can't go on. But in saying that, there's been a lot lately of younger women coming through, 19, 20, 17, and it's so wonderful. I'm thinking, oh, wow, what a way to clear and heal all of this now, before you get into these big, important relationships, before you become a mother. I had
Yes.
a client recently who was on the waiting list for a hysterectomy at the age of 20 because the PMDD was so bad. She was suicidal every month, and she thought, it's either I lose my uterus or I lose my life. That's where the point she'd got to, because she just didn't trust herself to not, in her real dark moment, take her own life.
And that happens quite often with PMDD, doesn't it? That we just go, let's whip out the uterus.
In the US, yes, I
Mm.
find it's much like let's just have a cesarean it seems to be more common in the US, or we'll schedule it when it suits the doctor's times and all of that.
Mm.
Like in Denmark, cesarean is absolute last resort, only to save the baby and the mother's life, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, it's much more, oh, it's convenient. And I find that hysterectomy seems to be offered a little too often, from what I can hear from my clients' experiences.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's not to blame the doctors, because the patients are begging for this.
Yeah.
And I can understand why. And doctors are like, what am I going to do? Like, the patients are begging, give me a solution. If you can't give, I've tried the birth control, tried everything now, nothing's working. I just want the whole thing out. And when the patient demands that, what can a doctor do in the end except say, okay. And I understand if it's your life or your uterus, you're going to choose your uterus, aren't you? But it's not a guarantee that you'll be free of it. I have clients come to me who are post-hysterectomy, or who've been through chemical menopause, who are on some sort of hormonal treatment that puts them into a sort of false menopause. They still have this stuff going on because the trauma's still there.
Yeah.
So this 20-year-old beautiful young woman, she's not getting hysterectomy now. She's healed. She doesn't have the symptoms anymore. She's not suicidal. She's joyful. Everything's turned around. And that's the most gratifying, amazing thing for me, to feel, here's this young woman who was not on track to become a mother, and who is now at some point in her life likely to going to have children, that there are going to be some human beings existing in the world that wouldn't have had she not crossed my path. And that's an amazing feeling of purpose. For me, plus everything else, not just that, but everything else she's experiencing now too.
Yeah, and that is so amazing and fulfilling. But I can only imagine, Natalie, it must be also quite frustrating to see the lack of answers, to hold this power, this ability to transform someone's life with RTT, and yet at the same time, it's not known as widely as we might like it to be. There are so many millions of women out there who are begging for these answers, as you said, and possibly having a hysterectomy unnecessarily and things like that. Does it bring up some frustration for you?
Yeah, in a way, but I've noticed just since I started this around 3.5, 4 years ago, the Red Tent. And in that time, when I started, I would get so many, not so many, but compared to now, I get the occasional, I don't know if you call it troll or hater, or someone who'd say, you know, what you're saying is dangerous, and, you know, people, women need to be getting the right treatment. And I'd be like, it's all a band-aid.
Yeah.
And there would be, people would come up against me with my message, but I'd just say, look, yeah, fine, that was me 15 years ago. I would have also said, that's not going to fix it, or it's not that, or I wanted my diagnosis, I wanted my badge, I wanted to be able to say, this is what it is, and I wanted to be able to blame everything on that diagnosis too, so that I didn't have to be responsible and say, it's not my fault, it's the PMDD that does it to me. And I was very reluctant to say, that's part of me that I need to do something with. It was almost like this thing that I could blame and go, it's that.
Yeah.
And there are plenty who are still at that stage. And that's okay, because I used to be there. You sort of have to come through these stages of awareness until you are that student ready for this teacher.
Yeah.
So I get the message out there. There's been a PMDD healing summit last week, and you can go and have a look at it if you're listening to this. It'll still be up, I think, for a while. PMDDhealingsummit.com. There are talks from teachers and therapists and doctors from all around the world. And what I've noticed, even just in 1 year, is that the conversation now is all about healing trauma. And it wasn't. Just even a year ago, it was all like supplements and sort of trying to tweak with the body's chemistry, instead of going, look, you have a pharmacy within you that is regulated by your subconscious mind.
Yeah.
And that's where you need to do the healing, and all of the chemicals will balance once you balance the mind. The body will follow the mind. Stop trying to do it backwards.
Yeah.
Just heal the mind and the body follows.
It's so incredible, isn't it? I'm always thinking, one of the ways I try and explain hypnotherapy and the power of it to people, the power of the mind, is through, it's almost laughable in a way how all the clinical trials out there, all the studies have a control group to control for the placebo effect. This magical thing that seems to happen, this pesky, annoying placebo effect. Hello.
Staring you in the face. Yeah.
That's the evidence for hypnotherapy. That's the power of the mind. When you believe you are healing, you heal. We see cholesterol numbers change, for God's sake. Numbers are changing on test results.
Huge physical stuff and I don't guarantee. I don't say, come to me and I'll heal you of, I'm not calling myself a healer of all physical ailments, but I have to say the stuff I've seen, like migraines disappeared, heavy cramping and pain no longer there. Had a client who had adenomyosis. She was scheduled for hysterectomy for the adenomyosis, which is very painful. Heavy bleeding, extremely painful menstrual cramps. Like, she would be in bed for 2 days on painkillers before her period.
Wow.
And she wrote to me, and she had completely forgot that she was due. And she said, this is weird. I'm playing tennis and I'm due my period tomorrow. I just realized I should be in bed. And then she hadn't even told me she had adenomyosis. She was coming to me for the PMDD and suicidal thinking. But she said, oh, by the way, I had this other thing, which I didn't even bother mentioning. It's gone. And she went back to the gynecologist and they just checked her over and tracked her for a couple more months. And then she was off the waiting list for hysterectomy because it was no longer an issue. And this is something that once you have adenomyosis, is sort of like, oh, well, it's too bad for you. I guess we're just going to have to operate.
And
that all healed. So, yeah, the body follows the mind. You just have to get to, it's just trying to get your attention. It's trying to call to you and saying, please look at this, please address this, please heal this.
It's so powerful. So if someone is listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to, start using the power of my mind, and maybe they're not quite ready yet, although I would say the teachers are here if you're listening, if you want to explore. But it might be that financially someone's not ready yet, or that they want to save up for it. What is something someone can do starting today as a little stepping stone, a starting point that could help them use the power of the mind?
So, go and look at Marissa Peer's videos on YouTube, like I did. That's where it all kind of started for me. I have a YouTube channel too. My focus is much more on this particular area, whereas Marissa's more general mind stuff. But I've got a lot of videos. They're nothing fancy, but the wisdom's there, I believe. And I have a masterclass all about PMDD. It's all on youtube.com/Natalie Ryan Hebert. I think we can put it in the show notes or something.
Absolutely.
So that's where, I begin there. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm giving lots of, tips and inspirational stories. I have a book. It's just an ebook. It's just, and it's called Women Who Heal. And it's actually the stories in my clients' own words. There's around, I keep adding to it because there's more and more all the time. I think there are about 33 stories in there now, of those who have sort of stopped and taken the time to write their story from, being really stuck in hell to being free. So you can read that. That's free to download. It's all on my Instagram link tree. So my Instagram is @Natalie Ryan Hebert. And if you feel like after looking through all of that you'd like to work with me, you can. I have an 8-week program called the Red Tent. And I also have a self-guided program called Whole Healed Woman, which is like the Red Tent, but you do it, it's a self-study, so it's more affordable.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Natalie. That's some incredible starting points and resources for people to get into this work, particularly if you're thinking, oh, PMDD, that sounds like it could be me. And I certainly know there'll be women listening to this who have just suddenly had such a bright spark of hope in what's possible for them. And I just thank you so much, Natalie, for giving us that today, and also for giving this to so many women. How amazing that you had that conversation with yourself in the mirror that day and decided to be responsible for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Georgie, for this platform to be able to spread the message a little wider. I really appreciate you giving me this. So, yeah.
You're very welcome. It's been so beautiful to connect, Natalie.
Wonderful. Have a great day, Georgie.
Thank you. If you're ready for the deep dive into this work to master your anxious mind, I invite you to join the Anxiety Reset program. Over 90 days, I'll be guiding you on how to build your mental resilience, reprogram those limiting beliefs that keep you stuck in self-doubt, heal your gut, balance your hormones, nourish your mind, body, and soul. Using a combined approach of naturopathy, nutrition, hypnotherapy, and live group coaching with me, you'll feel supported and motivated to show up for yourself consistently, day after day. And this is how you will experience extraordinary results. You can master your anxious mind. The best time to begin is right now. Let's do it together. You'll find the link to learn more in the show notes. Thank you for listening. We have reached the end of this episode. If you enjoy this podcast and you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would hit subscribe or share this episode on your Instagram stories, and make sure you tag @Georgie the Naturopath. But that is all for today. Please be kind to yourselves. Know that you are enough and you are exactly where you need to be.